All right, we're going to start up, and to start with, this is probably, some of this is going to be review, but it's going to lead into something that's not review. So I think you all know what CRUD is. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. You know what it stands for, you know what it's about, etc. Now, when you go through the stuff that's in here, and you do the R part of CRUD, which is the read, which we're familiar with the select statement, there's two ways that you have to write out routes for this. One is to select everything from every record from everything there is. And another one is to be able to select just one record. So in other words, and I think I've got a couple screenshots. It's kind of hard to tell on here. But with this one, you can sort of tell there's like the first record that's in our database, and there'll be another one afterward. All right. But you'll notice here that it just says title. So in other words, that says show me all titles. On the other hand, if I go in and do something like this, where I say title and I give it an ISBN, it's only going to show me that one. All right. So again, the idea is for create, of course, we don't provide anything in here because we're creating a new record. For read, we provide either nothing in here, which means show me all of it, or an ID, which means show me the one I'm looking for. For update and for delete, in both those cases, we have to provide, in both those cases, something afterwards, because we don't want to update everything. We don't want to delete everything. All right. So we have to provide whatever our key is. All right. Our ID, I should say. Okay. And that's what this thing talks about. Now, what I want to get into, though, is, CRUD and REST. There are different ways that you can do this stuff. In other words, there's different ways that you can write these types of applications. In just a minute, I'm going to go through another one of these, but it's what is REST. And the what is REST basically references this document, so that's why I decided to go through this one first. All right. So they start talking about the whole idea of resources. So it says to create resources in a REST environment, we commonly use the post method. So post, we are going to have to create post routes when we do a create. We're going to do a get route if we're looking for a single record or all records. We're going to do a put if we're going to attempt to actually update something. We're going to do a delete if we attempt to delete something. Now, they called it put, not sure why. You say, why didn't they call it update? Well, there's actually two of them. There's put, which basically says you're going to update the whole record, and there's also patch, which says that you're only going to update a few fields. And we'll be looking at that as we go on in here, okay? All right, and they just got some exercises. I don't think there's anything in here other than that. There's some practice stuff that's in here. There's all sorts of things that are out here, all sorts of documents out here that are good. Some of them are better than others, but I thought this one was okay. And like I said, this one, so I'm going to change this from what is CRUD to what is REST. Now, when I first started teaching this stuff and you started to write APIs and the like, you didn't use REST. We used something that was called SOAP, not like the kind you clean yourself with, but it stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. Today, that's considered more of an antiquated way of doing things. And the recommendation is today, as it says here, that you use REST. Now you can see what it stands for. I don't want to sit and read to you. All right. It's supposed to allow API communication to take place. How's that? All right. So they talk here about the separation of the client and the server. And it's been interesting this week because we are transitioning over to JavaScript in the morning class. All right, and I could already tell today that there was at least one person who was struggling, stopped writing the program, just started watching, etc., which is fine. But the point is, when you were in the AWD 1000 class, we were concerned with JavaScript solely from the client side. All right, that doesn't necessarily go away here, but the amount of work that we'll typically do on the client side is minimal at best. We are concerned with JavaScript on the server side. All right, and just so you know, and you probably already do, but Node.js isn't the only way to do this. All right, in fact, one of the things that I had advocated for in the past was rather than using Node.js, was to teach you guys PHP. It would have been another language. All right, it's used a lot. It's not used as much as Node is. I think it's easier to learn, and I already knew it. I'm not going to lie. So that was, a lot of it was very selfish on my part. I was outvoted. Basically, it was, Mr. Smith talked to Mr. Gudmusted, and they decided to go this way, which is totally fine. All right. Now, but this is the key thing when you look at this. It says when you use a REST architecture style, the implementation of the client and the server are done independently with one another. So in other words, you can make major changes to the client without affecting the server, or vice versa. And the reason for that, and they get into it a little bit in here, is the fact that HTTP is what's known as being a stateless type of operation. So in other words, if I go out to a server and make a request, and then 10 seconds later, I go out to a server and make another request, whether it's the same thing or something else, to that server, it doesn't equate that I'm the same person checking twice. It could care less, as opposed to two different machines checking a type of things. All right. So as it says here, separating the user concerns from the data storage concerns, we improve flexibility. So again, you can change one without having to make it have the other one worry about it, for lack of better words. All right. Now it says here on the very end of this paragraph here, you can see it. It says by using a REST interface, different clients hit the same REST endpoints. An endpoint is an HTTP. So it's, for example, that's an endpoint right there. All right. So literally, you're giving it some kind of a URL for which you want to look at something. And this is the whole idea about stateless. I don't want to sit and read that to you, except I do want to mention, as it says here, it's enforced through the use of resources rather than commands. All right, because REST systems interact through standard operations on resources, they do not rely on the implementation of interfaces. And if you say, I don't exactly know what an interface is, we really go over those a lot next semester. We talk about Java interfaces. I don't want to get into it right now. But this is the highlight right here. Reliable, quick performance, and scalable. And all of those things are things that are trumpeted when people talk about using Node to begin with. All right. So as it says here then, in a REST type of architecture, clients send requests to retrieve or modify resources. So again, very similar to the stuff that we looked at before. All right. But this has got it in a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage. Now, I'm going to have all of you by the end of the day today, I'm going to show you a tool, but then I'm going to ask you to download a tool. And it's actually a newer tool that I found in Visual Studio. So it used to be to test this stuff, you had to go out and download other tools. You still can do that. But Visual Studio has its own tools now to do this. And they have more than one, but I'm going to show you the one that I think is the best one. All right. So as it says, when you create a request, you can see what's in there. I'm not going to read that to you. All right. But there's information that's in there. The verb is the get, the post, the put, or the delete, as they say right here. All right. In the header, as it says right there, the client sets the type of content it is able to receive from the server in what's called an accept field. It used to be, depending on the package you used, you had to fill in a lot of this information. Today, with the package that we're going to use, all right, on Visual Studio Code, much of it is filled in for you automatically. If it's not what you want, you can still manually go in and change it if that's what you want to do. And the reason I'm doing this is we didn't do a lot of this when we first got into it. I just basically threw you into it and started showing you some stuff. Maybe this would have been a better way. I don't know. But they're talking in here basically about MIME types. And it was interesting because as I was starting through the JavaScript book today, it had in there, I don't know if you remember this, but when you add a CSS file, you used to have to say type equals, and then in double quotes, text/CSS, and that was defining the MIME type that you were using. All right, you don't have to anymore because it defaults to that, in a CSS file. In the same way, you used to have to say type equal text/JavaScript for JavaScript, but you don't have to do that anymore. All right, so why am I telling you that? Because there's other MIME types that are in there, as you can see right there. You can set the content or MIME type to text HTML. You can set it to text plain, which is just a regular text file. You can set it to text JSON, etc. And there's other things that you can set them to as well. Some of them are shown right here. All right. As it says there, requests must contain a path to the resource that the operation should be performed on. All right. It says paths should be designed to help the client know what's going on. In other words, you should try to create paths that pretty much show you what's going on at any time. You should be able to figure it out. All right. So they show an example right here, and I'm not going to read it to you. You can see it. All right. But what they're saying there is the customer is 223, or the customer number, and the order number is 12. All right. Paths should contain the information necessary to locate the desired resource. All right. So in the past, in the AWD 1000 class, we were concerned with the HTTP request. That's what we were doing all the time. In this class, we're concerned with the HTTP response. All right. Now, we've looked at some of this stuff in here, but if you look here, this talks about the status codes. All right. And I do want to take a look at these. 200 is good. That means basically everything was working as expected. Now notice with a 201, it says this is the standard response for a request that resulted in an item being successfully created. Why am I even telling you that? Because there's really a difference between returning 200, which means everything's hunky-dory, and 201. 201, since as they mention here, it's when an item was successfully created, that might very well be what you would want to return if you were doing an insert. All right. 204, no content. It says this is the standard response for successful HTTP request where nothing is returned in the response body. The 204 is quite often when you're doing a delete. That's what you're going to end up returning because there's nothing left because you just deleted it. All right. Then there's a 400. In fact, there's 3 of the 400 levels here. The first is just 400. The request cannot be processed because of bad request syntax, excessive size, or another client error. The bottom line is this. It's on the person, the resource, whatever is making the request. So it's from the client side is what you're saying right there. All right. Forbidden, kind of what you think. You don't have access to the resource. So it could be a database, for example. I don't believe I have any access to the Rankin Technical College payroll database. All right. I would be interested in it, but I don't think they would want to give me that. 404 is the one most people are interested in. All right. You asked for a file that could not be found. All right. Now it says there it is possible it was deleted or it does not exist yet. Yeah, that's possible. It's even possible that that file has been removed and you should get redirected to someplace else. They don't say that in here, but the 300s have got a redirect in them. Everybody is, you've either done that or seen that before, where you go out to one website and it moves you out to another one. All right. I always used to mention this. I know that Angie has seen this already, but when we were in the Java class, Java Android class, I would tell people to go out to java.sun.com. And you'd hit enter, and what happens? It would redirect you to oracle.com/java/technologies. Well, that's a redirect right there. Okay. All right, and 500 means, there's a problem with the server. As it says, the generic answer for an unexpected failure if there is no more information available. So sometimes that's like the last resort. Something went wrong, you don't know what it is, so you just send back a 500. And as it says here, so again, for a get and for a put, typically it's a 200, meaning everything worked. For a post, which means you're creating something, it's a 201. And for a delete, it's a 204. And as it says, if the operation fails, return the most specific status code corresponding to the problem that was encountered. Well, the bottom line is this. If you are writing an application and you want it to be able to handle things, somebody eventually is either going to purposely or accidentally put in something they shouldn't. And if you don't handle it, it won't be handled. I mean, if you're writing the server side part of this, it's up to you to handle it. All right. So they give some examples in here as it says, if you want to view all customers, it would be something like this. All right. If you wanted to do a specific customer, you would do it differently. Thought they showed an example of that. There it is. So that would be customer 1, 2, 3, and then they've got, again, some more practice things that are in here. And I'm not going to run through any of those. Okay? All right. So maybe you even consider that to be a waste of your time. Hopefully it didn't. And at least hopefully it makes some sense to you. Now, I want to talk about, if I can bring it up. This. All right. This database works. It's okay. If I had my druthers and if I had done it, wanted to do it again, and guess what? We're going to in just a couple of minutes. That's a terrible primary key. Primary keys, as I mentioned to you in the past, should be unintelligible. In an ideal world, at least when you're using a relational database management system, in my opinion, primary keys should also be, right now, unless I was going to say 978.0000001 and then go 0000002, etc., and that's not the way that ISBN numbers work, this is not a good choice. So what I should have done is put that in there as a, quote, regular field, unquote, and then had a field that was just called something like title ID. All right, I wish I would have done that. Well, that's what we're going to do in just a couple minutes. All right. So this weekend I was working on this and I was running into some problems. So I started to Google, and then I thought, you know what, let's just Google what I'm trying to do. All right. And so I Googled basically Node.js, MySQL application using a book database. And I found something that was similar to it. So guess what? It's a 3-part series. You each get copies. So we're going to start looking through this together right now. So what I'm going to start doing, and then we're going to go back and we're going to see if we can implement some, most, or all of this. But I'm going to start by just going through the first part of this, because most of this is conversational. In other words, there's not a lot you have to do right here. And after we get done with this, we're going to go back and we're going to drop the database and we're going to recreate it. All right. Now, I didn't send this to you, but I will. I've got these SQL scripts that we made before. You remember this? We did this the other day. I went back to the titles and just made a simple change. I added a title ID in there as the primary key. Again, made it an integer, auto increment, and then the ISBN, which was the former primary key, is now, quote, just a field, unquote, in there. All right? Because I did not like from the beginning, and I wish I don't ask me why I did it this way, I just did. All right? I shouldn't, they're probably working late at night, but I did. All right. You shouldn't have to be putting in your primary key like this for each record. All right? And I did. Shame on me. All right. So let's go look through part 1 of this to begin with. And again, believe me, I'm not going to sit and read. All right. This is the author's definition of what an API is. The whole idea behind APIs is communication. It's so two different resources are able to communicate with one another. And virtually everything has got an API. Anything of any size has got an API. You know, they mentioned some of them in here. You can see these. But the idea in here is to build our own. All right? Okay. So as it says, and I mentioned this to you before REST, there was SOAP. Yeah, and much of SOAP is historical in nature. But most of the stuff that people did with SOAP, I'm generalizing here, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, did not involve using a database in there. And that's one of the things that kind of differentiates REST. All right, it's assuming typically that you're using a database. All right, so again, you've seen some of this already, but I am going to take a little bit of time to go over this. As it says right here, I'm on page 3 of the first document. In a RESTful API, all documents or information to be shared are known as resources. The URL identifies the resources. REST URLs are created using an endpoint, something that starts with HTTP or HTTPS, and then a path to whatever it is you're looking for. All right? Now, we're going to go through, because I've gone back and done some rewrite on the stuff that this guy did, and we're going to basically do it together here, okay? But I'm not going to lie to you. As far as CRUD goes, create works like a charm. Whether I'm creating and looking at one person or I'm trying to bring in multiple people, work like a charm. Delete work like a charm, all right? So I shouldn't say that. Create did not work. The read worked, whether I was reading all files or whether I was reading a single file. So that one worked okay. Those two worked okay. The delete worked just fine. All right. I had problems with create and I had problems with update. We're going to see if we can fix those. Now, one thing to realize, this author writes this stuff in his way. I'm not saying his way is good or bad or neither. I'm not. But remember, if you remember, one of the things that we talked about when we first started getting into React, and I showed you express, is that word unopinionated. There's literally probably a limitless number of ways that you can do the same thing. All right. So I'm not going to say that the way that is done here is the best way or the worst way. In fact, I'm going to show you how we're going to end up making changes as we go on. All right. So the most used methods are post, get, patch, and delete. We've already talked about those. By now, this should make sense. This line I just grayed out up on the screen should make sense to everybody. All right. Okay. As it says, most often they return data in a JSON format. I don't disagree that they say in some cases XML, but it's not as much as with JSON. All right. So it says to do this, you need the latest version of Node. We got it. You need MySQL. We got it. Got XAMPP. We got it. Now, you don't have Postman. You won't need it. And I do want to tell you, all right, that if you want, maybe later after we go through this, I'd like to see what that's about. So I'm going to type in here Postman. All right. And Postman API platform, sign up for free. Now, you go out here and you can sign up for this. This thing that you see right here, it's not identical, but it looks very similar to what I showed you right here. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. Now, I used to always tell people to go out to postman.com and download this, and you can. But there also is a browser version of this. So if you're interested in it, you can literally type in Postman for Chrome. And you can bring it in as a Chrome add-in. Okay? So you can do it either way. What we're going to try doing in here, all right, and like all of you, you can do this right now. Just go ahead and bring up And your old project or anything, just bring it up in Visual Studio Code. Okay, it doesn't matter because we're not going to do anything with that project, but bring it up in Visual Studio Code, please. So you may or may not be able to tell when you look on here. I've got something here you don't have, but you're going to have in a minute. Over here, it looks like a thunderbolt. See that? What I'd like you to do is to click your extensions up here, and in here, type in Thunder Client. Now, mine's going to look different than yours because I've already got it installed. But my guess is, unless you've done some work ahead, you probably don't. So there should be an install button over there on the left. Just click it. And that should be all you have to do. And after you do, you should notice you get this over here after you've done the install. And what happens then, let me go and close this one. If I click here, okay, it's going to come up. In fact, let me close this there. And if I click here to bring it up, it basically, it's not showing it now, but it will bring up a new, it'll allow me to come in and create a new request. Okay, in fact, there it is, new request. I click there and there's everything. This is what we're going to need to test our API. All right. And I know Christopher had said something last week, and hey, I'm not going to make any excuses other than what I said was stupid. But yeah, you can. I could go and the program we're about to create, we could literally just type in the URL from a browser. We could just type in the URL for both a get of a single record or a get of all records. You wouldn't have to do anything special. Boom, you could just get it. But if you want to do the other operations, the create, the update, and the delete, you need to do it like this. So what we're doing here is we're basically simulating making requests out to the server. And if everything does work, you're actually going to see that we're going to change what's in the database. So if we say that we want to go and create something, ideally at least if we can get it to work, we'll have a new record in the database. All right. If we update, we'll change a current record in the database. If we delete, we'll delete an existing record from the database. All right. Now, I went and watched a few videos this week. I might even have one up. I don't know. Let's see. This was Postman. It wasn't bad. I watched it twice, but it was only 3 or 4 minutes long. But there was a better one that I actually saw. So let's see. Visual Studio Code Thunder Client. There's not much documentation with this, just so you know. That one here, this one was pretty good, I thought. All right. And I'm not going to go through it or anything right now, but like I said, I thought that one was pretty good. It was about 14 minutes long. All right. All right. And they say, so git bash, we've already got that. So most of this is stuff that we've already done, but rather than doing this, because we are going to go back and redo it, what I'd like you to do, all of you, is this right now. And that is go into, if you're using phpMyAdmin, go into phpMyAdmin, bring up XAMPP if you have to. If you're using MySQL Workbench, bring up MySQL Workbench. All right. And I'm going to grab this because I did make a new copy of this. Sure, that's the right one. It is. You've got everything, but that's fine. I just want to make sure you do. till 7. All right, so you should have the folder right now that's called scripts, SQL scripts. Yours is in a zip format. I'm going to grab the unzipped one here. Clean my desktop up again. And again, if you look, I guess I had numbered them before, so we have to figure out the right order for this. But let's take a look at what's in here. All right, I know we have before, but I want to again. So I'm going to open up each one of these, except for the old one, because there's no sense in doing that. All right, so this author's ISBN is what's referred to as a join or a jump table. What it has are the primary key from the author's table. All right, in fact, we may or may not even need this anymore. I don't know. All right, and we've got the ISBN in there also. Okay, let's forget about that one. That's totally fine. This one, the titles again is the one I changed. So you now have this. So we will have a regular title ID for our primary key. Now, I'm telling you this, and if you are like, duh, I know that, well, then that's good. But I just want to make sure you do. And that's why if I'm repeating some stuff or saying it, I'm not trying to talk down to anybody. I want to make sure that it makes sense to you. All right. So when we take a look at the stuff that's in here, there is a natural order typically when you start looking through it. Now, notice foreign key references the publisher's table. So that says we better put publisher in before we put in this table, because if we don't, we're going to get errors on every record. All right. And why? Because it's using the publisher ID. So it's expecting, we're going to have that. So if we look next, at the authors, well, you'll notice that authors is kind of an island unto and of itself in that it has a primary key, but it has no foreign keys. So that one to me would make the most sense to put that one in first. We're going to do that in just a moment. All right. So, and what else do we have in here? So we've got authors. And with the publishers, same kind of way. So technically, it shouldn't matter whether we put in the authors first and then the publishers, or the publishers first and then the authors. But we want to make sure we have those in before we go back in and put in the titles table. All right. Plus, with the other one, that author's ISBN, there's a primary key in there of authors. All right. So this is what I'd like you to do. I would like you to go in here into your local host. All right. And you probably don't even have to make this active. I don't think it's going to matter one way or the other. But bring up an SQL window. If you get an error on this, then you will have to click books first. But I don't think you do. And I just want you to type in drop database books. All right. And click go. And it should be going on your left-hand side once you do that. All right. Questions? Problems? Like I said, then try clicking on it first and see if that fixes it. So just go into your SQL window right now and put that in. Okay? All right. So now there's different ways of doing it. To me, the easiest way now is to just click the new button. And we're going to put it in again. So again, type in books. Now we've got an empty database in here right now named books. So I said, click the new button that's right there. We could even create our tables from here. That might be a good exercise, but I don't really feel like doing that. I'd rather have us go on right now, okay? All right, so we want to put in these tables. So what I'd like you to do is to go back and open up this thing. I just asked you this SQL scripts. So open that up. Unzip it first, and then let's start with authors. So go ahead and open this up like this. Now, look on the screen. You shouldn't have to do this because that should be active already. All right. you shouldn't have to do this because we know that it's a brand new table. All right. I could have had you just drop the old stuff and add this stuff too. That maybe would have been better. But grab this. This is creating the schema right here. So grab this whole schema for the authors table. Just everything that's right there, those 4 lines, copy it to the clipboard right there. So this is from authors.sql. Copy that to the clipboard. And then go back into here. All right, open up an SQL window, and you should be able to just drop that in and click go. All right. You'll know it worked because if it comes up green, it worked. And you should have a new table over here that says authors. All right. Now, if for some reason you got an error, then click again on books and try to run it again. Okay. So now we have the schema for our first table. So let's put in the records. So highlight from, at least on, it should be the same on yours, lines 10 through 31. Copy that to the clipboard. Open up an SQL window again, and in an empty SQL window, paste that in and click go. Now we should have our 22 authors in there. Again, you can always double check this by just saying select star from authors. All right, in an SQL window, clicking go, and that should have our 22 authors there in there. Any questions on that? Any problems with that? All right, then let's go on. Next, let's go and open up the publishers.sql. We're going to do almost the same thing. I'd like you to grab the schema for the publishers, those 3 lines, lines 5, 6, and 7 on publishers.sql. Then go back into here, open up an empty SQL window. If there's anything in it, remove it, paste that in, and click go. And now we should have the schema for our second table. There's only 7 publishers, so you can grab these 7 lines that are right here. Again, copy them to the clipboard. Again, in an empty SQL window, paste in those 7 records. Okay, and again, you can check it to double check it by opening up the empty SQL window and doing a select star from publishers. And 2 things about this. One I think I mentioned before, and one I maybe have or have not. But when you look at this right here, all right, those are backticks in there, and they put backticks, MySQL and PHPMyAdmin does, because if you had a table or something or a field name that had a blank space in it, you need to use the backticks. They just put them there by default for everything. And the where 1, you can remove that if you want to. That just means always. 1 is always true. And it's, in other words, it's just saying show me everything. Why they put it where 1 as opposed to just putting select star from publishers, I don't know. But somebody made that decision. So now when I click the go button, I should see my 7 publishers. There they are. All right, so I've got 2 of them done so far. All right. Next, I'm going to go over to the titles, our new and improved titles, not the titles old, but I'm going to grab that one, and I'm going to open that up. All right, and again, I'm going to grab the schema, which is bigger. So it is lines 5 through 14. Copy it to the clipboard. Paste it into an empty SQL window and click go, and I should not get any errors. All right, you see now I've got 3 tables in here when I look off to the left. Then I'm going to go back in here again, and I'm going to grab lines 16 through 40. And that has my 25 titles in there. So again, I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. Come back in here, paste it into an empty SQL window, and click go. And that looked like it worked. Again, to double check, I will again select star from titles, click go, and it looks like everything is hunky-dory, as they say. Now, what I've got in here should be what you've got in here. We're going to try later to put in our own record and manipulate our own record after we put it in, and eventually delete our own record after we put it in. Again, some of the stuff I had problems with. So I'm hoping collectively we can figure out what the problem is. All right. So that's that one. So the only one that's left is the author's ISBN. And again, I don't even know if we need that anymore. I don't think we're going to use it for anything, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. So I'm opening that. Again, I'm grabbing the schema, copying it to the clipboard. Pasting it into my empty SQL window, clicking go, and now I'm getting an error. Can't create table books, author's ISBN, foreign key constraint is incorrectly formatted. Well, then let's look at it. In fact, I'll look at it in here. There we go. All right. The problem is, I'll tell you exactly what the problem is. What I want to do is I want to link these two tables, but it's not this anymore. And this, it's not that. All right. So for now, at least, what we really will want in here, instead of ISBN, we're going to want the title ID in there. Did you hear me? So there's different ways you can do this, but let's do it like this. First of all, we've got foreign key right in here. Just type in title ID. And then down below here, right there, type in the same thing. Don't run it yet because we have to make one more change, and it's a big one. We have to change all of these ISBNs to title ID, which means we've got to change all of these second ones that are in here. I'll tell you what, just save this. Let's not put in that table. If we need it later, we'll go back to it. I'm not sure if we will, because at least now we're not doing any joins. That's the only reason that you needed that table. So let's go on. All right, so my hope is then, looking on the screen here, is that everyone now has the authors table, the publishers table, and the titles table. All right? And I'm taking for granted that if you don't, or if something didn't work, you're going to ask. All right, so let's jump back into here. Because why? Well, they tell us, let's create a brand new project. He calls his BIMS because it's Book Inventory Management System. All right, you know what? Nothing wrong with that name. So let's all come in here, and we can do it right here. Let's right mouse click here, do new folder. We'll call it BIMS. And inside of that folder, we'll put a single file that we'll call server.js. No, not a folder, I'm sorry. We want a single file in there that we're going to call server.js. So new text document, server.js. All right, yes, I want to change the extension, and I've got a couple instances of code open. At least one of these I want to get rid of. So let's see, new request books index. That was the one for the people this morning. All right. So now I'm going to open this BIMS with code. So I'm right here. There's nothing new here so far. I mean, there should be nothing we've done that surprises anybody. Should be nothing we've done so far that you say, I don't get it. But let's go back into our folder. Let's double click our BIMS folder. And let's get it ready to use Git. All right. But before we do, let's go out to Git and make a project that we call a repo that we call BIMS. Okay. So if everybody would please go out to github.com, yourgithub.com. And again, however you create a new repository, you can click the new button here. I always just, for whatever reason, click the plus sign here and choose new project. All right. I don't know why I did it like that. I've never seen that before. Try it in here. New. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to type in here BIMS. Okay. And mine will be public. You make yours private, please. All right. And click the create a repository. And again, I've said this to you before. We want this line right here. You want this one. Under the or create a new repository from the command line, You want to copy that line to your clipboard because we're going to use it in about a minute. Questions? All right. Then going back into here. All right, we're going to open up our Git Bash here window. I'll make this nice and big so everybody can read everything I'm doing here, but there's nothing new. So we're going to, you remember, you don't have to do this, but if I do a git init right now, it's going to fail because we don't have any git folder right now. So let's make one. So we'll say git init. You can all do that. And once you do the git init, you should all be able to go back and see the .git file there, right? So there's nothing new there. All right. We don't have to do a push. We don't have to do a commit. We don't have anything yet to do in there. But what I do want to do is now right mouse click on here and choose paste and paste in. Well, I guess I didn't save it. So hold on. I want that line, this line here. So I'm going to, the one right, I told you, right mouse click and copy. So I want to put that one in here. Close that, that's an old version. Open up this one, there we go. I'm going to right mouse click and paste. All right, so again, that's what yours should look like, except you won't have JP Scott Rankin. You'll have whatever your username is and hit enter. Now we've got that. All right. Okay. So as always, the next thing that we're going to do in here, I'm going to clear out my console and I'm going to do my npm init. All right. BIMS is the package name, totally fine. Version 1.0.0 is fine. The description, a Node.js application, REST API using a MySQL database. Again, if you don't like my description, write your own. It's totally fine. But something along those lines would be good. All right, hit enter. The entry point is server. We already created that. The test command, again, I think I mentioned this to you before, but if I didn't, there are different testing. There's things like Mocha, and there's a few other things that you can use for testing in here. We're not going to be using those, so I just hit enter here. The repository should be set from the way we just set it up. So I'm going to hit enter. Keywords, if you want to put some keywords in, go ahead. If you don't want to, just hit enter. I'll put in a few. So Node.js, MySQL. How about representational state transfer, which is REST. Application program interface, which is API. All right. Again, if you don't want to put in anything, then don't. It's not really a big thing. I'm going to put my name in here. All right. And I'm going to put in MIT here. The only other thing I do want to mention to you is when you are creating the package name, all right, you may or may not have noticed this, but if we, let's just say we had put in BIMS all in uppercase, it would have changed it to this. There's most of the commands in here, it does not want there to be any capital letters in most of the characters and stuff that you use in here. All right, so we've got that. All right, well, good, that's a good start. All right, so I can now, is it okay? Yes. So I'm going to clear again, and I'm going to make this smaller because it's way too big. There we go. And in my project, where am I? Right there. All right, I now have my package.json file. All right, but that package.json file has nothing in there as far as what I'm going to be, the middleware, etc. that I need. So it says here, go back to where I was, right there. All right, so we did the npm init. All right, they tell you to set this thing up. So this is what I am going to do. Now, before you do it, what they're saying is this. Right under BIMS, we're going to create a folder right underneath that called controller. Now, I'm going to call mine controllers because if we get this to work, we're going to have more than one of these. All right. And then under The controller folder we're going to put in a file called book_controller.js. Now, I'm not done yet. Then we're going to create another folder under BIMS called models. And we're going to put a file underneath there called book_model.js. These three files, you don't have to create the index.js because we already have server.js. You can create an empty DB connection. We're going to put all that information about the database in there in just a bit. You don't, of course, have to create the package.json. All right. So again, see if I can keep that open. I know it's going to close, but I'll have to reopen it again. Oops, and I will do that in just a second. So that over here and here. All right. So what I'm going to do then in here, cut this down. All right, just so you can see me doing it, and I'm sure you can all do it with no problem. So we're right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the new folder, and I'm going to call this controllers plural. All right, and then under controllers, I'm going to click for a new file, and I'm going to call this book_controller.js. So that's what's in here right now. All right. Then next, I want to go back, and I always just click down here to make sure that I'm not in anything. And I'm going to create yet another folder that's going to be called models, plural. And under the models, I'm going to create a new file that I'm going to call book_model.js. So with what's in here right now, we now have this, and this, and this, and this, and this. So we don't have the DB connection. We do have, again, where they say index.js, ours is server.js, where we have the package.json. So I'm going to click down here again in the empty area and add a new file that I'm going to call dbconnection.js. So when you get done, yours should basically look pretty much the same as mine right here. All right. All right, we're going to take a break in just a couple minutes. And I'm going to close a bunch of this stuff. So that's what your setup should look like right now. Any questions on that? All right. And we want, why is it showing me that? Let's see. I am the wrong one up. There we go. All right. So next we install the libraries. Now notice we're going to use three: Express, MySQL, and Body Parser. We've talked already about what Body Parser is. MySQL, of course, is going to allow MySQL or MySQL to communicate with Node, and we've talked about Express already. All right. We may end up adding something later. It's no big thing if we have to. So in here, I'm going to bring that up, and exactly as they show right here, but except remember, all we need is npm I. You don't need the -G. That's global. And just so you know, what if you put -G in there, there is a spot that is out on somewhere on your C drive or whatever your main drive is. And wherever you loaded Node, if you save stuff as -G, it puts them into that file, which means it's available to every program, but you probably don't need a lot of it for every program. So the recommendation is you just do an npm I. And where they've got the -S there, back in previous versions, you had to do the --save or the -S. You don't have to do that anymore. All right, it's automated, so you don't have to. So we're going to come in here. The order in which you put these three does not matter. I'll use his order, which is Express, Body Parser, and MySQL. Again, if you feel as if the explanation given to you in earlier classes of any or all of those packages is not sufficient, go out to npmjs.com and you can find it. Not only that, just so you know, we're using MySQL here, but there is supposedly a new and improved version of this, which is MySQL 2. He's using MySQL, so did I. All right, so hitting enter. All right, I'm again going to clear my console. All right. So we've installed the libraries. It says your folders should now pretty much look like this. I'm not going to say that because we've already looked at it. Again, what many people do, including me, is I always like to go back into here and just very quickly double check my package.json file. I know there's 3 files I put in. There they are. That's good. The other thing I'm going to do, just because it's much easier for us, let's do our nodemon I minus capital D, I'm sorry, right, npm I minus capital D of nodemon. Remember, the minus D saves it as a development dependency. All right. There's 2 modes you can be in for a project: production mode and development mode. We're in development mode almost all the time. That's why we use nodemon. So I put that in, npm I minus D nodemon, and I'm hitting enter. And it's going to put it in, hopefully sooner than later. I'm going to close my package.json and reopen it. Oh, I don't need lock. And there's my nodemon. You already know this. We've done it before, so let's do it again. That is, let's remove this test statement that's in here. Let's put a comma here and put in our dev. And again, this will be nodemon server.js, like that. So we have added the ability for us to go in and run this using nodemon. All right. After you've done that, do a save. And we should, at least, if not for good, at least for a while, be able to close our package.json file. All right. All right. Next, they go in and they talk about the process for starting the Express server. You all know this already. Everywhere in here they use var. Var is a naughty word now. You should never use it. So we're going to replace every instance in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. We're going to replace all of the, everywhere it says var, we're going to say const. All right. So just imagine const was there. I'll leave that up there for a minute so you can type it in. If you don't like 3,000, pick your number you like. I believe, again, it has to be between 3,000 and 99.99, to my knowledge. I'm going to use 3,000 as he does. We're not going to keep that app.get line there long, just so you know. Okay? Again, please make sure, don't use var here. Const, const.
Which file? We're in,
This is server.js. Everybody have that? No? And I'm going to give you a second because I want you to. I'm going to make a few changes to that in just a minute. So you know that. We'll take a break in about 5 or 10 minutes. We will take a 15-minute long break then. And why he says listen to port 8,000 here, and then he uses 3,000 is beyond my comprehension. I don't know why. Probably he started with 8,000 and changed it to 3. I don't know.
Where's that?
he's got a comment here that says, listen to port 8000, but then here he uses 3000.
Maybe he's going blind like you.
Maybe.
Wait, time looks like 8.
That very well could be.
Now I'm going to offend you by saying that.
I figured out a long time ago that pick and choose what you want to be offended by, and that does not offend me. All right, I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so I can put mine in. All right, so here's my server.js right here, right there. So I'm going to put it in, and I don't know if it'll allow me. Let's see, it should be able to. There, keep them both up here. There we go. So you can see what I'm doing. So const express, in fact, let me close that. There, we just need a little more room. Equals require express. Now, do you remember, because every one of you have had this class, that, for instance, in C#, how we used at the top of our programs, we had like using statements, and in Java, you'll know next semester, you have import statements. That's their version. There's actually a thing that you can put in, we'll talk about it later, that if you put it in, rather than using require, you can use import. Right? But there's nothing wrong with doing it this way at all. So I'm going to go a little further because remember, not only did we add express, what did we add? We added express, and we added, was it body? I don't remember now. Was it body parser and SQL? So MySQL. So I'm going to do another const here, and I'm going to put in body parser. You can't put in the minus sign, and I'm going to say equals require body dash parser. All right, let me make this a little bigger. There. And const MySQL equals require MySQL. Now, I think there's at least a good chance we're going to need the path module also later on. So I like to take the ones that are built in and put those at the top. You don't have to do that. The order in which you put these require statements is totally up to you. But I'm going to put here, oops, not kibs, const path equal require path. All right, so I now have 4 things in here. Okay, 3 of which I put in earlier when I installed them, and 1 that's a built-in, for lack of better words. Then remember, we have to instantiate an instance of express. So that's const app equal express. I've said this to you before, but I'm just going to say it again anyway. It doesn't have to be called app, but most people do call it app. All right? So then they asked you to put in this endpoint. Create endpoint. You can say create route. It doesn't matter. So app.get. This says when we're just at the main thing itself. All right? And we're going to put in here a request. That's our HTTP request. And there's our HTTP response. And they used a fat arrow in here, which is good. And you needed this. And I'm going to see what they have here. I want to see how they wrote this, because I don't know. Just a res.send, welcome to BIMS. Okay. You could have done it without putting in this curly brace. I'm just used to putting that curly brace in there. So res.send, welcome to BIMS. And I'm going to put over here, I am going to put a semicolon right there. All right. Now, he's got his app.listen, and it's not that what he's got in there is wrong. But I want you to start learning from the beginning, and that is, I'm going to put a constant in here. So, create port constant, and that'll be const port equals process dot env dot port, or I think he used 3000. So I've got that. Now, the reason that you use that, and again, if I mentioned it before, tough, I'm saying it again. And that is, what this is saying is, if whatever software you're running this on has its own port already set up for this, use that. If it doesn't, use port 3000. Because eventually we want to be able to push this up to Heroku. And if you don't put in something like this, and you just leave it at 3000, Heroku doesn't run stuff on port 3000. So you're going to get an error message. All right. And then finally, I need my app.listen. Now, since I've changed that to port, that'll now become port, like that. All right. So you should change yours accordingly. I'll show you the entire thing in just a moment. All right, then we're going to take our break. So how does he do this? I want to see what he's got here. Anywhere it says function in here, we're replacing all of these with arrow functions. What does that mean? That means instead of having in this function, paren, then some code, we're not doing that. We're doing our parameters, then our fat arrow, followed by the curly brace, and hit enter. So ours are going to look like this. And then I think he says here console.log. So we'll use template literals. App running on port. And of course that should get out of there. Say app running on port 3000. Whoops, sorry about that. Try it again. Semicolon, semicolon. So this is my server.js up till this point. I'm asking this question. Is there anything that's in here right now that doesn't make sense to anyone? Because I have to rely on you saying, yeah, there is one thing I've never gotten, and you ask. All right. You'll notice that the only thing here that's not in gray is express. And that's because we are using it here. We have not yet used path or body parser or MySQL. That's why those are still grayed out. All right. So what I should be able to do now, I should be able to do a file and a save all, or just at least a file save. Come back to here. I don't know what that is, because that might be the old version I had up. I'm going to again, because I think I closed mine. That's okay. Right mouse click, choose my git bash here again. Make it wider and bigger so you can see it. I should now be able to do my npm run dev. And it says app up and running on port 3000. Yours should say the same thing. If you get an error message, something was typed in incorrectly, you should be able to hopefully be able to go back and debug, and otherwise ask during the break and I'll be glad to try to help you with that. Now the other thing is, we should now be able to open up a window here and go over to localhost :3000, hit enter, and we get our welcome to BIMS. That, again, that should work for everybody. All right. So I want to finish this up. I know I'm going over longer than I usually do, but I want to finish this first part up before we take a break. So we've done all that. Now, don't worry about the testing with Postman. All right. But you say, well, I want to. Okay, fine. Then let's see if we can test what we've done so far. Let's see if we can test it with ThunderClient. All right. Now, if what we're about to do, if it works, it should come up and look like this. Does that make sense? Because that's all we've got in there for a route right now. So I'm going to come into here. and I'm going to click on the Funder Client icon. All right, and then click on New Request right here. And then you can do this in two ways. All right, ours is not an HTTPS, so it should be http://. All right, and you should be able to, either one of these should work. You should be able to say either localhost :3000 and click send. And there's, see down here is my welcome to BIMS. All right, or if you'd rather, you should be able to do your loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1:3000 and click send. And again, you get welcome to BIMS. What I like about Funder Client is that if something does not work, you'll get a thing down here that'll say like response, and you can click on it and find where your error is. Does that make sense? All right. So let's see what we've got left in this first one here. So we did the equivalent. Postman would have done the same thing, just so you know. All right. So it says this tutorial was meant to introduce you to REST APIs and how to set them up. We've done that. When we come back from the break, we're going to jump right into part 2. As it says, we will learn how to create a modularized project using MVC architecture. Before we do that, I want to talk to you about MVC, which is Model View Controller. All right, so for now at least, I'm going to open up the other one, and I'm not going to go into it at all. It is 118. Let's come back. Well, I'm going to make it long because I went longer with you. Let's come back at 135, please.
Can I see your server.js file?
Yes, can I just let me
Yeah,
stop
sure,
this
no
and
problem.
save it, and then I'll be happy to.